So if it sounds a little bit repetitive later, you'll understand why. We are calling this Clinical Trials Clubhouse one burning question at you, because in a survey that we did with a number of people across the country, one of the things that we've learned from Clubhouse is that these things can go on for a long, long time, hours and hours. In fact, there's one Clubhouse that's trying to go break a record. They've been up and running for 17 days already. And that's not our intent. Our intent is to be respectful of your time and to give you a compact hour to 90 minutes of discussion. And we'll typically try to focus this around one really burning question, something that's come up that people really want to know a lot more about. The current issues that matter to clinical trialists, such as all of us on this call, are related to things such as patient recruitment, virtual trials, diversity, data acquisition, transparency and security of that data, and employment. So we're going to host this regularly with a hand-picked panel, inviting views on one burning question. And the moderators, Talia and myself, are going to seek to try and just keep us focused on this. An interesting feature that we've added to this is the last 5 minutes of each clubhouse will, Clinical Trials Club, be set aside to kind of talk about what is the burning topic in the minds of all of you for the next week. So hang in there. We don't want you to miss out on that. Our campfire is really around human clinical trials, and we'll gather around the best and the brightest with the most to say on stuff.
Did we lose you, Michael?
You know, one thing I learned about Clubhouse is you have to be on Wi-Fi to speak. Otherwise, your audio is compromised. You could be a presenter. I mean, you could be an audience attendee with on Wi-Fi, but just a quick tip, because it's like the unwritten rule.
Oh, that's good advice.
I remember someone asked me to speak, and I was driving my kids to look at karate practice, and I realized I had no voice, and it was because I was on Wi-Fi.
Oh gosh, no.
But let's keep it going. Yeah. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Marianne.
How you doing?
Excellent. Thank you so much
excited.
for joining.
Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it. This is like the new hottest tech trend, and you know I'm an early adopter of tech.
You are indeed.
This is up my alley. I'm like ready to go.
So here's some guidelines for you here, Marianne. One is always to introduce yourself. Don't take too long, but share your name and what you do, and then respond to the burning question first. So I suppose all of you want to know what that burning question is, and there is no promotion, selling, or pitching on this. So just be aware, we'll be watching for that, and we'll be politely asking you not to do that. So really, today's burning question is really around whether or not the COVID pandemic has helped or hurt patient recruitment for trials. We got resounding interest in this area because there are very divergent views on this. And I'm going to turn this over to my talented co-moderator, Talia Hight, now, and let her start this off.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. All right, so this is a hot topic, as Michael said. Really excited to dig into this. So maybe we just start really simply right now. So for those who feel that the pandemic has helped patient recruitment for trials, we hear from you right now. What's your thought on that? What specifically has helped, maybe just to get us started?
Yeah,
I bet Marianne's got something.
Yeah, so I think clearly there's been a movement where we have been for at least a decade to talk about patient centricity, and now we have an opportunity to walk the talk where we're creating a concierge experience, whether you're a technology company, a service provider. And so when we talk about patient burden, removing that impact, I was just on a call just earlier before, well, we're trying to measure that, right? Where we're saying patients want to be engaged. Maybe they don't want those notifications, right? And that's just a choice of configuration. It's the opportunity to solicit their input in advance, just like any other user, right? For any other app that you may have downloaded on your phone, right? And so I think what we've done is allowed us to be closer to the patient, having them part of making choice in clinical trial. And I'll say, I'm a big advocate about results and outcomes. We're seeing 90% increase across telehealth, where patients want to use it as a choice of an option, meaning they don't want to go into a site for every visit, but they want the flexibility. And what's really interesting and eye-opening for me is that it's not an all or nothing. You don't have to go fully virtual trial or not. You could have choice, and I think that's the empowerment and the movement that's happened today. And so I'm already seeing the results. So whether I'm talking to a sponsor, a CRO, a tech provider, a clinic, a site, a patient, an investigator, they want choice. And they want to make it easy for them to just engage and reduce those dropouts that a lot of us are just wildly passionate to ensure we keep the right patients in the studies.
Love that, Marianne. Thanks for that insight. Curious to you and to anyone else that might have an idea on this. Do you feel like we are at a point in our trials ecosystem and with all the stakeholders that are involved, that we are at a point where we can really offer choice at the individual patient level, not just at the trial level? I mean, within a trial, that individual patients, individual physicians, individual stakeholders within a single trial can really be given sort of choice as to how they engage and things like that? Or do you feel it needs to be up a level, meaning you set it at the study level and then everybody within that study is sort of, follows the same pathway? Curious anybody's thoughts on that.
Hi, everyone. If I can jump in here, my name's Heather Williams. I'm the head of project management and customer success at TrialStat Solutions. We're an e-clinical tech company, so my focus is on data collection and how do we make the complex process of collecting data compliantly both simple but also robust and nimble at the same time. And in reference to the burning question today, we see both sides with our clients in terms of the positive and negative with their recruitment. But one thing we see across the board is that, and this speaks to your question, Talia, is that they're starting to understand that there has to be a way to figure out remote everything if needed, with a balance between both. And as a tech provider, we're actually seeing really great adoption of whatever we're able to put out there to help patients participate and help our sponsors figure out how do we deal with this pressure to make these changes quickly. And that's already having long-term impacts for what else they can offer on a patient-by-patient basis. So we have studies where we are offering patients different ways for them to complete, say, an ePro diary. So maybe they are comfortable with doing it online, but maybe some of them aren't. So they're doing them paper, and we're working to be able to customize that right down to that patient level. And do they need to have accessibility features? What do they need to make that possible from a remote perspective? And then layering on that sort of sponsor and site oversight on what's happening. But from where we're sitting, we're actually starting to see it trickle right down to that patient.
That's great to hear. Love that. Want to ask anybody else here that's up on the stage here, any thoughts in response to what these views that were just shared, or back to sort of the general question of, for those who feel the pandemic has helped patient recruitment, what specifically has helped? We'd love to hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marianne. Hello. I work at a mid-sized CRO overseeing departments, including project management and some downstream services. Our experience at our own CPU is that the pandemic has actually helped recruitment. I think just the awareness of the general public, understanding treatments have to come out to deal with COVID, has given the population the knowledge, and they're inquisitive on learning more about COVID trials, which has translated into new participants wanting to participate in research even outside of COVID. So we have seen a very steady incline of research participant interest in participating.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, I was just going to say to what Maria was saying in terms of interest, never before in all of our business time have we had people actually contacting us as a clinical trial company asking about our trials and how to get into trials. It has never happened. And our sales line gets 5 to 10 calls every week. And unfortunately, a lot of this has to do financially with people's health and trying to find other avenues. But the interest, people are literally having time to sit and read about these things and talk to each other and spend time on Facebook. And there's a really wonderful thing happening social there where we're starting to even see that trickle up to us.
Yeah, Heather, that I think I've heard that a number of times. And Maria, I'd be interested to know, those patients who are coming into your COVID trials and don't meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria, we're hearing that a number of these patients still want to do something. Are you seeing the same kind of thing, or what do you do with those who fail screen?
Yeah, so we do try to utilize them in another study if they can't get into the specific, vaccine or COVID treatment that they're looking for. Our CPU is mostly for normal healthy volunteers. We're an early development company, so we do a lot of patient studies, and we have made the decision to stay away from COVID infections. And so, we're not dealing with that population, but in the normal healthy volunteer spectrum, we are seeing a lot of interest that starts with COVID, or, that's where the conversation begins. They're reaching out, and then they learn that there's other opportunities, for other treatments and other compounds. And of course, very motivated by the compensation.
Yeah, that's great. Really curious about to that point, Maria and Heather, you mentioned this. What do you think is specifically sort of driving the interest around this? There's a number of things. There's a sense of altruism. As somebody mentioned, I think Heather also mentioned, sometimes it's looking for additional sources of income for some participants. Are there other things that are maybe driving or helping enhance the sort of just helping patient recruitment? Any other thoughts from anyone?
Yeah, this is Archie Franklin, and I happen to be a patient who's participated in clinical trials over the last, actually, a 15-year run, if you will. And for me, certainly, I think you talk about the altruism and things, but I think for me, it's more just the participation in the scientific endeavor and the ability to be able to provide that kind of assistance to the community, the research community, the pharmaceutical industry community, and for me, it's been a little challenging in that the fact that during the COVID trial or COVID year, I had just actually started on commercial drugs. This is the first time in 15 years I haven't been on a trial, so I have been trying to sign up for some of the COVID vaccine trials. I happen to be of an age where they don't seem to be looking at, but I have started seeing a lot of solicitations for some of the other trials within some of the sites, since they see that I'm someone who's active and willing to volunteer.
That's great. Love that, Archie. Really curious, when we're talking about helping recruitment, how do we define help? What outcomes do we expect to see when patient recruitment is helped? I think that's a fascinating question. I'd love to hear thoughts from anybody on that.
One of the things that we're starting to see is, and I know there has always been very active advocates on the patient side, and I know some of them that are just phenomenal, but to us, it's really ramped up to the extent that if I go out and I say, we're starting a new trial on XYZ, I'd like to get some patient input as we're helping our client work on putting these CRFs together. It's going to have an ePro component. What would that look like for you? I have no issue having hands put up in the air and getting that feedback. And I'm seeing, and it used to be strange if I called and made that ask to somebody or reached out on social and said, hey, I know you're really, really involved with Alzheimer's. We're working on a project. Do you want to provide input? Do you have anyone in your group of patients that would like to, participate in what we're doing here? Which is a little bit of an extension outside of the work that we do, but something that we do with some of our clients. And by and far, over the last year and a half, much more responsiveness, and even people reaching out to us and saying, hey, it came up that e-clinical data collection is something that's a real challenge because it doesn't actually take into factor a lot of the times what we need as a patient. We'd love to tell you some stuff. Like, that has never happened to me before. So there's a really active group of patients out there who are taking control and going for it. And if you tap into them, they want to give you that information if you're willing to listen.
Talia, I think, the patient view is very, very important here. And Effie, if you have some insights, especially from the rare disease side of things, as to the benefits that you've seen from all of the interest in COVID research, we'd love to get your inputs.
Hi, this is Effie. I don't know if I'm going to know as much as all of you do, but I have been speaking to a lot of individuals who actually run a lot of clinical trials or who have served those parts of the community, and everyone in that area, they're super excited and motivated at this time because they feel like they've been able to gather more people that they couldn't have accessed before, right? With the limitations on financial barriers and travel barriers and just having sick children in general that cannot travel, especially for a long period of time, that they're able to access more patients, oddly enough. And it's obviously there's a lot of downsides, and so many people have lost out in the last year on trials that they were involved in or about to be involved in. But it's also opened the eyes of how many restraints that clinical trials have had around them that just simply don't need to be there. So I'm kind of excited to see where that's all going, and to just really learn more about it and keep my ears open, because I also feel like most people don't know about clinical trials in general. And I'm not sure whoever said it earlier, but calling out on social media is really effective. And, quite frankly, most people are so busy and they're so slammed, and they're dealing with so much emotionally anyways, and advocating and raising their kids, that they don't know where to look to find out if these things are even available for them. But if they're pinged here or pinged there on social media, it kind of plants a seed for them. So I am really excited to see what walls come falling down due to COVID. And this is Effie, and I'm done speaking.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you to say a little bit more specifically about some of the work that you've been doing, and obviously you have a very personal interest in making sure that good clinical trials are done. So please feel free to share a little bit about your group and kind of some of the things that you're looking forward to.
Hey, this is Effie. My group specifically, CT and MB1, we aren't in any clinical trial phases at this point. We're still working on mouse models and all of that, so we're definitely a little ways away from anything for our particular gene. But just making this more accessible, clinical trials, is what's exciting to me. I do feel like so many people don't feel like perhaps they are potential patients, or, just in general don't have access to things like this, and they feel intimidated by it in general. And I think that the conversations are being started it's also going to bring in more diversity, right? Like, so many underserved populations in our communities and across the world who can't access this, and in any way, they're going to be getting into these clinical trials, which is going to be so valuable to have different ethnicities involved in certain things that could almost a lot of the time never have been accessed before because of the barriers of travel. Travel's huge, and being able to do a lot of these things online and follow up and be compliant, obviously, as a patient, but being able to do it online and have calls and phone calls with doctors and researchers is something that needed to happen. And I'm excited to watch everyone nurture that part of clinical trials. And this is Effie, and I'm done speaking.
Effie, thank you very, very much. I think it's always important, and all of us recognize the importance of patient centricity and the needs of not only designing the trials with patients in mind, but certainly to try to get to that whole patient understanding, because you can find a patient who clinically or symptomatically matches completely for a trial, but if they can't drive or they can't get to a clinical site, then it's a useless situation. I might ask, I see Elizabeth is here. Elizabeth, would you mind introducing yourself and maybe speak to a little bit of that whole patient side of things?
Hi, Michael, and hello, everyone. Lovely to be with you. By way of background, I am one of the co-founders here at Consuli and delighted to be working with Michael on launching this important initiative. We're engaged at the intersection of those that maybe have historically been left out of the clinical trial sphere, being able to sign up for Consuli. You can go to consuli.net and get matched to a trial. So we've been decoding the thousands of clinical trials that are currently underway, and right now working to help folks get engaged in a trial if they so desire. And we understand that not everybody is interested in particularly a vaccine trial or COVID-related trial, but there's lots of data trials that are really important to researchers. And so kind of at that intersection of more research means more cures. That's part of the void we're working to fill. So delighted to be with you, Michael.
Thanks very much. Talia, I know just watching the clock here, I want to make sure that we get to the other part of our agenda.
Yeah.
So I'll let you push on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just, I think, heard excellent points about how the pandemic has helped patient recruitment, and heard really good insights from, a bunch of people. Curious about anybody who thinks that the pandemic has hurt patient recruitment for trials. Any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly it's shaken things up, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So, it hurts. Yeah, I think it hurts the status quo, right? It's a really interesting question, all right? Has it hindered? I think, having been on, I can proudly say I've seen each side of the table, whether it's the sponsor side, the CRO, or the tech side. And often when you have...
I'm not sure. Can we hear Marianne?
No, I can't.
No.
I think we lost her there for a minute.
She'll join back in here in a minute.
Talia, if I may,
sure.
So in my experience, and we do limited patient studies, but I would say that the pandemic has
how this will work.
Oh. Sorry, was I speaking over someone? Maria was just starting to talk because we lost you for a minute.
Oh, you know what happens? So I'm using Clubhouse through my iPhone, and I just got a phone call that came in. So I went to go press call you back later.
Bring them into the room, Marianne. Bring them into the Clubhouse room.
You know what? Good tip. I'm gonna make a request for that.
Go ahead, Marianne, and then we'll want to hear from Maria. But Marianne, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a technologist, and I like being able to talk about value whenever I have the opportunity to provide a meaningful impact. And COVID, I think, disrupted the status quo, that what you mentioned, the question you asked. But I also think that it was a opportunity to test and truly confirm that this direction is the direction we need to go in, and you almost needed that force of COVID to get us towards adopting innovation that was already available. And I think what you're going to find now is roles converging, people really looking to accelerate their knowledge, insight, and also question why we were creating such an apprehensive to change. And I know I've seen that in the world of the CRO, where the role of the CRAs are changing, and they're looking to become a different value proposition to an organization.
I've seen tech companies coming together to build alliances and collaborate. And I've seen sponsors coming together and say, hey, what best practices have you had? I don't want to go through a pothole. If you've got some best practices around how to change protocol design, I want to hear about it. And so it's just really refreshing to see that this virus that's killing us literally is also empowering us to come together in a completely different and meaningful way.
100%. This has been a forcing mechanism for sure. And every stakeholder in this process is being challenged with innovating and figuring out how we can bring these things together. And frankly, I think everybody agrees it's terrible that a pandemic had to happen in order for us to figure out how we were going to move this forward. But what in my mind, what still needs to remain front and center always is the patient experience and what we're trying to deliver at the end of this. And so, it's interesting to see how everybody's coming together to do that. We got a couple of folks here that wanted to come in and say something. Archana.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thanks. This is my first foray into Clubhouse today, so
Welcome.
First time trying it out. I wanted to chime in.
We're not far ahead of you. Please take a couple seconds and introduce yourself as well.
Yes. So as I mentioned, my name is Archana Sa, and I have worked in the pharma biotech world for the past 25 years. Big pharma, tech, small startups, as well as CRO world. And I also chair the oncology board. And I wanted to touch upon one question that was asked earlier by Talia. Is there any indication where we have seen a dip in enrollment due to COVID? And oncology, definitely one of those which has been impacted, not only in clinical trials, but also clinical care of the patients. There have been statistics put out where we have seen when the pandemic hit last spring, there was a 60 to 70% drop in diagnosis of cancer patients, let alone the treatments. So that is one therapeutic area that has been actually significantly hit by COVID. The good news is that our sites that do these clinical trials in oncology, they have risen to the challenge. The sponsors and CROs have risen to the challenge, and we have put in a lot of digital and mobile technologies to enable and bring those and restart a lot of the trials that are put on hold. And also, as far as getting the patients into the clinic, putting the measures at the hospital so patients feel safe to come in for their diagnosis or for their treatments or images. And we're trying to turn the leaf there to bring it back on track, but definitely that's one area that has been impacted.
Yeah, that's really great to hear from you, Archana, on that, and absolutely. Curious if anyone has a response to that or any additional thoughts around, how the pandemic has hurt patient recruitment. Any other insights on that?
If I can go back, Talia, my little insight was just an input that it's affected the recruitment of what were ongoing trials at the height of the pandemic. Nobody was prepared, right, to deal with what came, and so there was a lot of reshuffling and re-strategizing of how to make the visits happen, and therefore relying more on the digital options that have become sort of the norm now, but were not really in use back then, and so. I think of it more of a disruption of those ongoing trials, and then moving forward on new studies. Now we're having to deal with the people that have been previously infected by COVID or having the vaccines or have been exposed to different treatments experimentally, right, in clinical trials, and what sort of options or other opportunities do they have to continue on with research when they've been affected, one way or another by the pandemic. So that's something I think that should be considered, and really curious as how to this turns out, because I think it may have a negative effect on patient recruitment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, Talia, this is a great discussion. There are so many other solvable points that come out of this. And in fact, just a note to everybody online here, you know, we, in the room, we set this for an hour, but we've got a lot going on. I think we're going to try and take this to 10:30 West Coast.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Michael. So I'm curious about whether anyone thinks that there may be, changes in trial patient populations, in the perception, I guess, of trials from the patient's perspective. So, in other words, are trial patients, whether they're healthy, potentially healthy volunteers, or patients that are looking to participate in treatment trials, you know, are their perceptions impacted and having a negative impact? I'm curious to hear any thoughts from folks about that. I'll share one sort of anecdote that I've heard. One thing that I have heard has been sort of this challenge from participants that, you know, it's only taken 9 months. It's only taken 9 months to develop a vaccine that's now marketed, for a COVID vaccine under EA. And why did that happen so fast? And why does it take years and years and years to develop a treatment for something else? Casts for folks that hold that sort of perception, sort of the sense of on the credibility or validity of this one way or the other. I'm curious about any reactions to that.
Hi, this is Elizabeth again. Talia, I think that's a great point. And actually, I often think that we as a community need to speak in terms of man hours that have been dedicated to this cause. Because I think if we took the sum total of research and sort of labor that has gone into this very fast but incredibly parallelized body of work, I think folks would feel more comfortable. And that is something that goes to the issue of communication, right? We've got to, as a sector, do a better job in that regard. And one other thing just I'll point out is, when I think about one way that the pandemic has hurt, I don't know if other folks in the room could say anything about just the sort of silencing and or censorship, if you will, of communication involving trials that have to do with COVID. I know Julie's on the line and has had a lot of experience with this, but I'm curious whether others in the dialogue have as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elizabeth. Thank you. I'm not sure about that. I think that to your point about sort of bringing together and making more information available, I think one thing that has really helped and helped the public's perception overall has just been this view of sort of the open source science around everything going on with COVID. I mean, the argument could be made that that there has been a lot of transparency around the process from the sponsor side. In some instances, some people may feel from the sort of government side, regulators think that. For example, when I think it was Pfizer released their full protocol back in the fall to sort of assuage that the protocol is maybe not as scientifically sort of designed and rigorous as it should be for a trial with the intended endpoints that they were trying to achieve and on the timeline they were trying to achieve. They were widely applauded. I heard some criticism around that too, but for the most part, I feel like the general public felt like that was, a good move in with transparency. So I think that like just sort of the open source science side of this and just trying to really bring transparency across the board, these large registries for that allowed patients or interested participants in let's say COVID vaccines in particular, vaccine trials, bringing things sort of together so that things could be managed at a larger registry level as opposed to putting the onus on a bunch of individual trial sites that were trying their best to get started and enroll as fast as possible. And it just felt like there was really a coming together and a general sense of transparency. But I would love to hear if someone has additional thoughts on that or maybe a counterpoint to that.
Talia, just to build a little bit on that, agree that a lot of transparency in the context you described. I'm just talking about getting over this issue of, gosh, it's just too fast, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really that consumer perspective that this, wait, maybe it didn't get fully vetted or, and I think if we were to take the total sum hours of, let's say, traditional 5-year development cycle and how many thousands of hours went into that, right? And when you did the same math, yes, it's a shorter window of time, but I suspect that we find that there's many, many, many more tens of thousands of hours that have gone into this development in this short window. That just can help. We always have to, and Julie's been great at helping us remember, like what it's like to be on the other end of, the realm of research. And you're just a layperson. How do we instill trust? Because that's what you're talking about.
I was going to say exactly the same, Elizabeth, what you were talking about, and to extend on that. One of the things that we're trying to do with our company, and even when we pick our partners that we work with, is how are we as our industry talking about what we do? So when I explain to my family, friends about this whole process of how FastFix was developed, I don't talk about the clinical research. And I think even when we think we're simplifying something, often we're still using a lot of language and jargon and things that are just not resonating with people from a patient perspective. I use the example of a house. If you go and you build a house and it's you and 2 friends, how long will it take? If you do a barn raising and you get everybody in the community together and everybody does it, suddenly in a weekend, your house is built. Is it a better or worse house? It's probably a better house. We all got together and we did it fast because we all got together and we could do it fast. And it doesn't take away from the quality of the work that was done. It's probably better. And stepping outside of how, as a community, I think when we think we're simplifying, we're not necessarily using the language that the people we're trying to speak to here. A lot of people do it great, but I think it's something that, as a company, my team is really trying to be cognizant of, much more so now, because people are interested. And when you have an audience that's interested and curious and wants to know, if you can give them what they need in a way that they can absorb it, you get a lot more traction. So I agree with you 100%, Elizabeth. I think that we did a great job. It's just hard to explain it when you talk about it in our clinical space.
Yeah, Heather, it's Michael, and I appreciate your insights into that. We've asked Lindsay to come up to the stage here because Lindsay does an awful lot from a writing perspective, and Lindsay, I know that you are a self-avowed listener versus speaker, but I'd love to get your insights as to what could be happening with regard to either clinical literature that we should be doing to eliminate some of the things that Elizabeth was talking about.
Thanks so much for inviting me up, Michael, and everything Talia, Elizabeth, and Heather was saying within, the community, right? I mean, everybody in this room, it sounds like we're all very experienced in the space, right? And even when I go out to my own family and try to explain what a clinical trial is, it just does not resonate. And in terms of the writing piece, absolutely. I even tweeted about the other day in the headlines, vaccine approved. Well, it's not approved. It's these simple headlines, the difference between an authorization and an approval. And I think when this communication, we really need to figure out how to communicate science to the public in a way that they can understand, right? Because I think a lot of us have been in this space for years. You know, it's very difficult to communicate that. So getting folks involved from the writing community, absolutely. And I can push some of these issues up. I do a lot of work with the American Medical Writers Association. We have a conference coming up here in another couple of months. So perhaps that's a conversation. But, you know, I'm right there with you on that topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Talia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these were really, really great insights from everybody. I know we've got about, we're keeping this room open for another 15 minutes here. And one sort of next question I want to pose to everybody here is curious about how COVID trials specifically, so either vaccine trials or for the treatment of COVID, how COVID trials have impacted the public's perception of trial participation. And I asked this question, I sort of posed this to the clubhouse here, because I've heard some very differing thoughts about this topic, and I'm happy to kick it off, but want to leave it open-ended for a second, if anyone has a response to that. All right, well, I'll kick it off here then. So a couple of things I've heard about this. Again, the question I want to pose to everybody is, how have COVID trials, either vaccine or the treatment of COVID, impacted the public's perception? So I have heard a family member of mine say that, who is knowledgeable about trials, having participated in a few trials herself, say that she thought that the trials were really successful because she was reading in the headlines that the vaccine trials in particular were making such a concerted effort to ensure the recruitment of diverse participants that would resemble, you know, the and ethnic makeup of the United States, let's say. And that was a headline that was promoted, sort of to Lindsay's point, and something that had been, you know, that was widely promoted and discussed about how these vaccine trials were intended to really ensure a diverse group of participants. And that's what she heard on the news, and so that's how she felt. I had one other family member, though, who said that the vaccine trials tried to do that, but absolutely failed in their mark, I guess, because they felt that with people of color disproportionately dying from COVID, the trials should have been designed so that the vaccine efforts were even more focused on recruiting those populations into the trial, so that it wasn't enough to simply mimic the U.S. population when the U.S. population is not that is not sort of treating all Americans sort of equally in terms of that.
I'll jump in here, Talia, and say, you know, if you look at the data that's come in from, you know, these were rapidly improved trials with 30 to 40,000 people in each of the vaccine trials, and you know, obviously many of these patients were financially incentivized. Some of them, you know, a couple $1,000s, but a lot of them got into the trials and didn't realize that it was going to be a 2-year commitment for, you know, post-injection follow-up, etc. But even with all of the incentives that were put into this, added to the altruism, you know, the data shows that over 80% of the people who got into these trials were Caucasian. You know, the fact of the matter is that certainly, you know, just taking from our own local experience here in San Diego County, the disproportionate number of individuals who are affected are clearly Hispanic, Latinx, you know, and in the African American population in the Southeast. So, you know, while we've got effective vaccines, or purportedly effective vaccines at this point, the reality is that this actually, COVID became kind of a microcosm for what's wrong with, you know, with trial recruitment in general. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Archana. I just wanted to add to Michael's thoughts there. It is very interesting when we look at the statistics of where we were a year ago when it came to enrolling diverse patients in clinical trials, and then how the COVID pandemic and specifically the clinical trials for those, it definitely moved the needle, Michael, I feel, where we were, we got on the path of, we were compelled to be on the path of enrolling those target patient populations that were most impacted. We're seeing the highest death rates as well. There is a long road still ahead of us, to be quite honest, but it was a good start in my view. At least I look at it as the positive side, as the glass being half full rather than empty. I know a couple of sponsors, they paused and they slowed down even at the cost of delaying a week or two of finishing up enrollment to make sure they had enrolled a higher patient populations from those ethnic groups that were the most impacted by this disease. What I urge the industry to do is a call to action for the industry is to take the lessons from that. And there are two key learnings that come out. Go take the trial to where the patients are, into the community centers, remote heartlands of America. Don't limit yourself to just the bigger cities. But, it is possible to enroll these diverse patients while leveraging different health technology tools that have been implemented successfully in these clinical trials. But start with involving these patients and asking them what works and what doesn't work. What are their barriers in participating in these trials right from planning stage. We talk to so many different patient advocacy boards as well as patients who have participated in these trials, and time and again the lesson learned that they share with us is ask us, build that trust with us early on, and we will be your biggest advocate. So I feel educating the patients, educating the community about these clinical trials, involving these patients right from the get-go and at every stage along the process, all the way through the end where, companies are putting out layman's summaries of the outcome of what happened after you got participated in the trial, what was the result of that trial, that all of that will go in building the trust with these patients. And I think there is hope to move the needle not only in infectious disease and COVID, but also in complex diseases like oncology. Very good. We are honored. One of the people that I consider a superb guru in this arena has just joined. Craig, can I ask you to give some insights?
Thank you for calling on me. I have to admit that I came in largely to listen, and I haven't been in the conversation long enough to have derived an insight. So I'm going to hang on a bit, but I'll raise my hand if someone...
Okay, well, that sounds reasonable. Okay. It sounds reasonable, Craig. I just know that you've worked in this arena for so long, and really we would benefit from any insights you have as to specifically what is it that our burning question today is the good and the bad that's happened with patient recruitment around COVID.
Yeah, so you haven't put it that way. I'll speak to just a few things that I've been thinking about and hearing from various colleagues and clients that I've been working with. So, and I don't think there's any rocket science here in what I'm about to mention. So certainly there has been this increased realization that we need to have better and diverse representation within trials. And it's heartening to see that the U.S. government has begun to incentivize those that conduct trials in terms of making it a requirement that certain, recruitment cells are filled and diverse in an appropriate manner. And that's put a lot more attention in this particular area, so much so that I hear more and more about nonprofit organizations and initiatives that are really working at this. The other topic that comes up, which complicates this, is a lack of trust within communities of color in particular. and I know this firsthand as I'm a member of a community of color, based on a relative lack of literacy about the clinical trial space, what it's about, how it gets conducted, coupled with very many unfortunate historic events that have occurred in our communities when it comes to engagement with the medical and healthcare system. And that being as it is, with the recognition that there's a need to address this, many of the initiatives and nonprofits that are working on this problem are also working to increase literacy through community organizations and opinion leaders within our communities in order to build this trust over time so that we actually do get more engagement. And then I'll say finally that because I work in the digital health space in particular, it's been heartening to see what I'll call an emergent space of the application of digital technology within clinical trials that's working to improve the identification of trial cohorts, to improve the education around trials, the improvement of experiences that actually result in better retention of those trials, and then, though cautiously, the use of digital technologies and AI to improve a better collection of both patient-reported but also passive metrics from trials that then get converted into better real-world evidence. And again, the reason I say cautiously is because we have to, on a parallel track, make sure that bias that we're seeing in artificial intelligence, as well as abuse and lack of security of trial data, and particularly in areas like, that are related to mental health and other stigmatized diseases, that there's the right level of practice, education, and regulation around those topics. So, sorry to go on so long, but you asked the question, those are some of the themes that I've been hearing about, reading about, and interacting with colleagues that are working on these particular problems and challenges in this space. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Craig, it was awesome to hear that because it's really very much so in line with some of the concerns that we have. We can't allow, I think there's a technology, especially AI, has become, the next shiny object, and we need to remember that clinical trials are built around humans, and human beings are concerned about things such as, just as you brought up, about data security. I think this entire idea of what is called data dignity is a worthy discussion. Elizabeth, I know this is something that you've talked about extensively in the past. Do you want to share a little bit of your views on data dignity and what should be happening for patients?
Sure, Michael. Yeah, I think, big picture, we perceive that, we know that public policy has moved in the direction of making individual data about oneself, essentially the creative works or the ownership, is owned by the individual. And we have, all kinds of business practices that haven't yet caught up to that reality. And, what we perceive, it's quite important that we not just, sort of gloss over patient consent or, sort of get patient consent for one purpose, but then repurpose their data for something else like AI or the like, without really essentially, cutting them into the equation. Jaron Lanier, who is a pretty famous scientist at Microsoft, has recently calculated, as of about a year ago, the value of individuals' data across the whole sphere, not just clinical trials, not just medicine, but kind of across the entire digital landscape, is worth almost $20,000 in an annuity to that person, and that has profound implications for many. So it's a bigger conversation, Michael. We are going to be hosting a dialogue around data dignity on Clubhouse starting in a couple of weeks. We'll have, a series of experts who've been thinking about this a long time. We're, kind of in the sphere of activating many of their thoughts and creative works and scholarship. And so we'll have a bigger conversation, Michael, on this topic. But that's just a light dusting. And back to you.
No, appreciate that, Elizabeth. And we'll look forward to hearing more about that on future, clinical trials, Clubhouse get-togethers. So for all of you that are online, and thanks so much for hanging in there and listening to this, we kind of are innovating a little bit here, trying to keep this around, ancillary, but focused on one question. And this one this week about being, good or bad for patient recruitment. Where has the COVID epidemic actually led us? What we'd like to do is now, in kind of closing this up here, we want to take the next 5 minutes or so to poll all of you and really understand what is your burning question? What would you like us to discuss next week? We've got inputs from a number of national experts. We've got a short list that we're starting to put together. But since all of you have invested this time today, we'd love to hear from you. And I'll throw it out to Heather. Anything specifically that you want to know about for us to discuss in depth next week?
Hey, Michael, and I apologize if you can't hear me. I am in the car now because we're over when
we can hear you. Modern tech.
And I do have 2 dogs as well, so if we get excitable here, I apologize to everyone on the call. They are also interested in research.
Obviously.
And for me, I think some of the stuff that we were talking about a little bit earlier around how are we communicating as an industry to participants is really neat. And how do we collectively look at what we're doing as best practices and how we're working together to share what we do, and taking that next to turn it into really great examples in our industry that don't use industry language. Something around how we're talking about what we do, I think would be really cool.
Love that. Such a good suggestion. Thanks, Heather. Want to throw it out to others as well. Interesting topics for our next Clubhouse next Friday. Anything from Marianne?
Yeah, I probably have 2, but if I had to pick one. Look, we're embarking in, everyone's talking about a shift, whether it's an incremental or a paradigm shift of doing something differently to cater around the patient. What I am wildly passionate about, like my DNA is around, how does this form new collaboration and partnerships? So for a sponsor, my question for them would be, how does this change your outsourcing relationships? For a CRO is, how do you engage differently with your technology providers? And then for a tech company, where are you going to create more flexibility, right? And so we all need to come to the table a little closer to make the impact. And so my burning question is, how does the impact and the movement of improving patient engagement with digital tools reshaping the way we collaborate and partner? So I'm happy to facilitate a call, add perspectives, or bring more people to the party, Michael. So we can get different perspectives from a site, from a patient, from an investigator, from CRO, a sponsor, a tech. So I think that's the meaningful magic, right? Where we're able to figure out, we have to go in this direction, and this is what it's going to take. And so I'm a big advocate for being able to embrace tech and innovation that will drive the impact and change, and we're already seeing incremental movement. I think if we're able to come to these talks and talk about the impact, like the average cost of a patient that drops out of a phase 2, phase 3 study is approximately $20,000 to $24,000 per patient. And so if we're able to say, because of this investment and the change we made, we're able to retain, X percent Y patients and Z dollars, and continue to talk about those experiences and how we got there, it's only going to help us, right, to be able to, pioneer from an incremental step to exponential impact.
Yeah, I love your ideas around, where those partnerships could come from, because clearly the success around development of COVID vaccines has been, an alliance between government, research, industry, to bring this all together with a hell of a lot of money. But, the reality is it can happen. And that's, I think, what you're talking about is how do we make it happen? So both of you and I, we met over the collaboration alliance world, and I'd love to have you continue to help push that agenda with us.
Yeah, lots to do, Michael. Let's do it. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Amazing. This is great. Thank you. Any other inputs from anyone? Okay. Michael, I'm not sure the best way to do this. Should we set this or should or should we take this offline and we'll roll this out to the group later?
Yeah, all of you who are on here certainly can reach us and send additional ideas. But I think I think we've got what we want, and maybe what we'll do is I think there's some fun in making sure that we've got something that really is burning, and we'll start to get that out to everybody over the next week, and be looking forward to this being a reoccurring project, if you will, to all kind of crowdsourced better answers in clinical trial development. We'd love to have all of your participation because each of you comes from a little bit of a different discipline, and it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful hearing all of you today. So thank you, each and every one of you on the stage, and for those of you who are in the audience, we look forward to your continued participation. And as you've got comments next week, let's get you up on stage.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining this discussion, and looking forward to our burning question next week.
Great job, guys.
Thanks, everyone. This is great.
Thanks, Talia.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Craig. Bye-bye.